Hi everyone, welcome to the UNSW Bachelor of Design Industry Insights Lecture Series for Core Design Studio 3. Hopefully my mic is on, I think it is. Before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which our campus stands, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and we pay respects to elders past, present and future. So today we're really excited to welcome Bryan Hoedemakkers and Charmian Grove from Deloitte Digital. Deloitte Digital are a self-described team of thinkers and makers, which is very much along the lines of who you guys are as well. They are on a mission to redefine the impossible and build a smarter future for all. That sounds very familiar to all of you, hopefully. So Deloitte Digital is a multidisciplinary practice that incorporates service design, spatial strategy design, user experience design, visual and motion design, content and narrative strategy, digital reality and immersive experiences. So they are looking at creating uniquely human experiences that transform the world for clients and their audience. So it really is another fantastic opportunity for you guys to connect with designers of different disciplines and really hear about their multidisciplinary practice and their collaborative practice in a corporate environment. So I might just now hand over to our team. Firstly, I might just hand to you, Bryan. I'll just get you. Oh yeah, there you are.
I'll share my screen now. Just going to make sure that Teams pops back up. You can see that all right?
Yes, it's just, I'm just about to pop that up onto the screen. There we go, fab.
Cool. So shall we do a little bit of introduction about what we do?
Yeah, that sounds great. I think it would really help the students to hear about, I guess, what Deloitte, a little bit about Deloitte Digital and about your design team. That, you know, for some, they aren't quite sure about the area of design and your practice. So that'd be fantastic. Thanks, Bryan.
Yeah, cool. So Charmian and I are part of a team called Customer Strategy and Experience Design. We sit within Deloitte Digital. In Sydney, we're both in Sydney. Charmian's in the office now, actually, in our little Makeatorium space. I'm sitting at home in my home Makeatorium space. And we basically work with clients across Australia, really big companies, because we sit in Deloitte Consulting to really help them get at the heart of their customer strategy and then build experiences for them. And those are experiences across multiple different things. It could be, you know, a website, some graphic design, it could be visual design, UX, UI, it could be service design, all sorts of things. And I guess in this chat, we kind of want to talk to you. I'll just go to the next one. We kind of want to talk to you about the other design superpowers. So, you know, typically the things that we do are, you know, we design brands, we design marketing collateral, we design apps, we design websites, we design services, we design all these things, which is kind of our bread and butter in Deloitte Digital. But we're also starting to design these other things. And this is where, you know, designers can flex their other superpowers other than, you know, graphic design or the visual design side of things. So these kind of sit adjacent to that. So we want to talk about conversations, spaces, experiences, innovation, doing and designing design sprints, talk about global sustainability and then side hustles as well. And we'll talk about some nuances and then at the very end about the design process and how, you know, each time we're doing something, when we're designing something, even with the biggest corporates in Australia, we're using the same process and the same kind of methods and tools. So yeah, and Charmian, I don't know if you want to jump on and add a few words.
Just unmuting myself. So I'm Charmian Grove and I'm part of the design team here at Deloitte. I'm one of the managers here and I work closely with Bryan on lots of different projects of varying scope and size and client type. My specialty is that I work with disparate groups of stakeholders to try and bring them together and create a shared vision for the future. And often we do that using our human-centered design led workshops. And I guess it falls very closely within that conversation, designing conversation space.
Awesome. So am I back on? I am. All right, so let's kick off. So first of all, designing conversations. Has anyone, I suppose everybody's seen a chatbot before.
I think we've lost your mic there, Bryan. I don't know if you can hear me, but it looks like we've just lost your mic for a minute. I might just see if it sounds like you've gone underwater actually now, Bryan. So I might just pass to
Are you here?
Okay, I might just, Bryan, can you hear me now?
Yeah, did you lose me?
Yeah, we lost you. We lost you right at the beginning. So I might just get you to, as soon as you said conversations, it started to go underwater.
I'm going to switch over to a 4G network and see if that works.
Sounds good.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect. Yep.
It's probably my video. It says it's terrible, so I'll just keep going and interrupt me if I'm. So basically, from a conversation point of view, when chatbots first came out, they were very robotic, and I didn't really, see much value in talking to a robot other than saying, "Can you please get a human being to call me?" And I don't know if anybody's been following Soul Machines out of New Zealand, but they're starting to create these very lifelike CGI, realistic kind of humans. They're starting to call them like digital humans on the internet. I'm just gonna switch over now. I might drop off for like 2 seconds while I switch this network over.
Sounds good. This is what live streaming is all about. We get all the nuts and bolts of it. So hopefully he'll be back soon. I'll just throw up the slide that we.
Is that better?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, perfect.
Have you lost my screen, or is the screen still there? Okay, cool.
Screen's good.
Fingers crossed the Telstra network works better than the TPG network. So yeah, they're starting to design these kind of digital people, right? And you don't want a digital person on screen, whether it's on an app or whether it's on a website, talking to you in a real robotic way, particularly if it looks quite human-like, and if they're crossed uncanny valley. So talking to this person, you turn your video on, and they're looking at you, and you're looking at them, and they're reacting to your emotions, and they're having a real conversation with you. So it's kind of like, how do you design something that's literally just a conversation, and how do you start to prototype that? And some of the kind of issues that we run into is if it's text-based, you literally need to have someone sitting on the end of a phone texting answers to the questions that you're answering as a concept testing approach. When it comes to voice, it kind of has to be someone on the end of on the end of the phone. But now we have these systems like Amazon Polly and Amazon Lex, which are very easy to use, where you can design conversations really fast, really quickly, and integrate into a whole lot of different things. And you can actually use those tools to test and concept and prototype really fast. So this whole idea of designing conversations is becoming a lot easier to do. Okay, so conversations are moving rapidly into the future, and they're not going to be as robotic as they were in the past. Not going to be like this test bot on the side here. Okay, I go back to my slides. Charmian is going to talk about designing spaces.
Right, this is me. So as Bryan mentioned earlier, We also have a spatial strategy and design team here within Deloitte Digital, and they specialise in that fusion of retail, brand and digital experiences. And the team's a really interesting mix of designers, architects, strategists, amongst a whole host of other things. Not only do we do a wide range of client work, but we also do a lot of our own work. So the top two images in this slide show you our new Deloitte offices in Sydney. They're actually going to be the keystone of this Quay Quarter Towers development, which is going to revitalise the eastern end of Circular Quay. So next time you're in town, have a look and you can see that building. And that's been our spatial strategy and design team who've worked on that. And I think it's a really interesting development. We're really excited for it to come to fruition. There's supposed to be light in every area of the building on every floor. So it'll be quite groundbreaking. We're also going to show you a little later how post-COVID collaboration is starting to come back, and particularly how that's been done with virtual tools. But for organisations who are operating in this sort of space, they're starting to have to think about how they shift the way they design and build workplaces, and how they can allow for adapted ways of working, enabled by elements such as modular designs, zones, and movable furniture. So I think that's at the forefront of that team's mind at the moment. The bottom image there is a really exciting project that we've partnered with Sabre Astronautics on. And we're actually designing Australia's Space Mission Control Centre in Adelaide. And this is going to support the future aerospace industry. So for this, we'll partner with other parts of Deloitte, our technology strategy and innovation team, financial and cyber risk businesses to help us deliver on the project. And I think it's a really interesting one to point out because the advantage of working for a company as big as Deloitte means that if you need expertise in something quite specific, you can often find it internally, and that's a big advantage. Within digital, we like to think of ourselves as a bunch of really diverse unicorns that all bring something unique to the broader Deloitte offering. So that's where we sit.
Cool. So in terms of designing experiences, this is kind of where things start to overlap quite a bit. So I'll give you an example of a live project. Most people wouldn't have heard of Telstra TV or have one unless you're a Telstra customer and you got it in a bundle at some point. But Telstra TV is basically an Apple TV for Australia. It has Netflix, it has Stan, it has all the things. It also has access to Telstra Box Office, which is free movies for Telstra customers. This is not a Telstra ad. But basically what they wanted to start to do is understand how they could differentiate that experience beyond just a box that plugs into your TV. So we started looking at the on-screen experience, which they control quite a bit. We started looking at this idea of the second screen. So designing for your mobile phone when you're sitting in front of your TV. If you're sitting up there, you can be using it as a remote. You can see down the bottom picture of what the remote looks like. And also, how can you, try and find other content to watch while you're watching something live, and also save that content for later. So you can actually browse through the catalog and then save things and watch them later. So this is all about getting people to, be comfortable on the couch and be happy about that experience, and also extend that experience. So if they're on the bus, they can look through the catalog of TV programs and movies and save something for later. So when they get home, they don't have to sit there in front of their TV spending half an hour browsing through a catalog, which is what most of us end up doing. They can do that on the bus and then have something ready to go at home. So designing this whole experience from a concepting and prototyping point of view, it's not that easy, because you have to talk someone through that approach, and it involves a lot of, I guess, role play and acting. And what we would do is we would get people into a test lab, we would give them a mobile phone and say, pretend you're on the bus and pretend like you really want to find something to watch tonight. And we're going to give you this app and you're going to browse through it and find something to watch, and just get them to go through how they would do it. Then later on, we would say, okay, now you're back at home, you're on the couch and you're about to watch something. Here's the box that you're going to use. Go through, where would you find that thing that you just saved? It involves a lot of like role play and a lot of kind of talking through those things. And this happens in big corporates. You'd think corporates don't do role playing or don't do acting or things like that. It literally happens in the depths of the testing labs, particularly for experiences. And often people, they would say, well, how do you test an end-to-end experience? And that's something that's really hard as well. And that's where we'll break it up into, we want you to play out the scene, which is you on the bus, then we want you to play out this other scene. Or if we were thinking about an element of the app, we would say, what's the best way to test this? Is it to give them the app itself and to actually role play that out? Or is it just to do a pure UX test on something like userexperience.com? So we have to kind of pull apart all the concepts and the prototypes and figure out how to test them. So all of the design skills, customer research, customer testing, prototyping, concepting come into play for this. And even other skills like drama, role playing, acting come into play in these kind of situations. So that's designing experiences. I'm just going to click through here. So one of the things that we have at Deloitte, I mentioned the Makeatorium before, which Charmian is sitting in right now. It houses our 3D printer, is the Dreamatorium, which is a room that has nothing in it, because ultimately it's about people bringing their passion projects or their hobbies into work and telling other people about it. And this is where I kind of thought we need to be at the forefront of what's happening in innovation and what's happening in technology. How can I design an experience for people to have in order to do that? So I co-created with a colleague the Dreamatorium, the idea. We've had about 20 of them so far. It's a workshop series and people come in and talk about their hobbies, whether it's illustration and animation and VR, designing for voice, product design, IoT, brainwaves. We had a chat about EEG devices, visual content creation. We've got someone at Deloitte who does videography for massive global artists in the music scene. So we have these kind of workshops, and I'll flick you through some photos of them. This is one on 3D printing. This is me designing an experience where people at Deloitte Digital can get access to 3D printers, can touch them, see them working, learn how to design something in 3D and then start printing that thing and get it and just play with it. And the whole point of this is we don't want people at Deloitte Digital to go and sell 3D printers to clients or to build 3D printing into their client projects. We just want people to know that 3D printing exists, and at some point in the future they might have a spark of an idea or they might have a need to print something physical, particularly when they're testing something. Another one is Tom doing some illustration and animation in VR using a tool called Quill. So he actually creates 3D animations, and he did one right in front of us. So a lot of people, were very interested in that. And it's just about bringing the technology to a whole lot of people. So someone might eventually one day have an idea how to use VR with our clients. And we use VR heavily in our spatial team to construct our workplaces and then walk through and experience those workplaces virtually without actually being inside the building while the workspace is getting built. Here's another one where we've got a whole lot of product designers to come in and help us understand how to build things physically, because as Deloitte Digital we do a lot of apps and websites and intangible strategies and ops models and all that kind of stuff, and I thought it would be a good idea to get people exposed to the physical side of designing products and how how we use lo-fi materials and pieces of foam to actually construct things. And this happens, this happens at our clients as well. We've done some physical prototyping with clients often, and having these kind of skills across the board in Deloitte Digital allows us to very easily just grab a piece of foam or grab a piece of cardboard and build something physical. Whether it's an intangible thing that we're prototyping or not, it doesn't matter. It's easy to build something physical out of it. And then from a very creative side of things, making sure that creativity isn't constrained to just things that make money. And that's a lot of corporates are like, yeah, we can be creative only if we have a monetary outcome. And what we try to do with our people is to say, you can be creative with all sorts of things, and your creativity shouldn't be restricted to just making sure we're making money. And being able to unleash that creativity helps people understand that, creativity fits in many places and doesn't always have to be a monetary outcome. So we go a bit crazy sometimes with the paint and the Play-Doh and things from, what's that place in Marrickville called? Reverse Rubbish. Yeah, we've got a whole lot of stuff from there. Cool. Design sprints.
Us missed the studio, Brian. The students are probably, that last slide looks like our studios after a session sometimes. So I think everyone's feeling nostalgic about getting back into the studio after seeing that.
Yeah.
Well, the girl in the middle of that photo is actually a sculptor. So she, it always gets messy when Nabs is around.
And a lot of our corporate clients will feel nostalgic about when they were 5 years old, bringing out creativity and bringing out the Play-Doh and the Lego, and it's kind of thing that you should never put down. It's something that you should bring throughout your working life. So Charmian is going to talk through design sprints for us.
All right, so we wanted to touch on this a little bit and talk a bit about a recent service design project that we're involved in. This was a 3-week design sprint that we ran in collaboration with SBS. We were scheduled to work with a group of their digital product owners and just take a look at some of their digital offerings and see what might be desirable in the future from their users' perspective. Then COVID happened. So the first challenge we had when we decided we were going ahead with the design sprint was what was that experience going to be like, and how are we going to work with the client? So the first step was to basically get them comfortable with the tech that we were going to be using so that it didn't distract from what we were trying to achieve when we took them through the sort of traditional stages of discover, define, design, deliver during the design sprint. We ended up running a 3-week virtual design sprint. Everybody was virtual, using Zoom and using a virtual whiteboard software called Miro that some of you may be familiar with. We ran it like any other design sprint. We had daily stand-ups and stand-downs with our SBS teammates. We used breakout rooms to carry out various activities along the way throughout the process. We conducted user interviews with Zoom. We designed lo-fi prototypes and tested them virtually using Zoom, using Miro. We iterated on the designs, then we tested again. Everything we did went onto the whiteboard. That was the one rule. Everything had to stay within the whiteboard. And that is a snapshot of our Miro whiteboard there on the right. It was a pretty groundbreaking way to run a design sprint. And the client was actually really blown away by how much they were able to achieve and what they could still do in terms of design within a 100% virtual environment. Even our final deliverable for the client was an output from this whiteboard. So it was quite effective. And it really made everyone stop and think, beyond the confines of business as usual and how we needed to get creative in order to run the design sprints themselves. And the team were pretty elated with what they've achieved And we've now used this as a benchmark for what's possible in terms of running design sprints in a virtual world. I know that service design is kind of a new element for what's being offered. So I'm sure you guys are going to have some questions later and we'd be happy to answer them.
Sham, I might, do you mind me piping in there? And normally I wouldn't ask a question so early, but just while you're on the topic of design sprints, someone has just popped in the questions. Could you clarify what a design sprint is as opposed to, say, a traditional design project? Is it just the time aspect, or?
Yeah, so we tend to use an agile structure when we're running design sprints, and that just really refers to how we break up the time that we have available to us. So we basically had 1 week sprints, and what you'd normally do is within that sort of agile process, you'd have stand-up, stand-downs, and you'd also have a showcase at the end of each week and present to your stakeholders and give them an update where you're at. Is there anything you want to add to that, Bryan?
No, I think from a corporate world, the way they used to deliver projects is something that you might hear is called waterfall, where they will start a project and they'll finish it like 6 to 12 months later, or even longer. And agile is a new methodology that's brought in this term sprint, where you break the full project up into smaller chunks, and then each chunk is called a sprint, and you have to deliver something within that sprint. So you have to either create a prototype or create a part of your app, something that you can test with clients or that you can deliver. And a design sprint is basically where you create a prototype within that period of time, so within that short period of time. So you'll hear the term waterfall and agile as you start to get into the corporate world, and then agile uses sprints, and in design we use design sprints, short, sharp pieces of work. Yeah.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. Thanks, guys. That's great.
Oh, good. Okay, is it back to me? I think. So on the topic of sprints, I don't know if any of you have heard of the UN SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. There's an organisation called Unleash, and they hold a massive innovation lab every year, I believe. And the last one was in Shenzhen in China. So I was in China in November of 2019. In Shenzhen to basically go and facilitate.
Sorry, Bryan, you just dropped out there for a minute.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back now.
Okay.
We just dropped you at what you were doing in
video doesn't.
Yeah, thank you.
So basically, I went to Shenzhen to facilitate an innovation lab, which had about 200 facilitators and about 1,200 participants across every country in the world, where we focused on designing solutions during a 1-week design sprint process for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And basically, there was a lot of people from around the world pulled together, almost randomly pulled together to go through the design process, basically go through the design process from start to finish in a week in Shenzhen, across the whole city in multiple different locations. And my SDG group had the privilege of being in a place called Cloud City, which is like an innovation space in an innovation precinct in Shenzhen, which is amazing. That also hosted Maker Fair Shenzhen while we were there, which was insane. I was very happy about that. And basically, I was there as a facilitator to help the attendees go through the design process from start to finish, and challenge them when they go back into their default mode. So if you think of the SDGs, there's a lot of like really tricky, really complex problems, and the participants are people that have been on the ground with these problems for, you know, many, many years, and they basically see it as we need to chip away at this problem slowly and we can't solve it really fast. And going into the design sprint, they had to totally obliterate that thought from their mind, because they have someone else that's standing next to them saying, oh, this sounds like a problem that you could easily just break up into, you know, multiple different modules and then solve each one of those. And it took a lot for the attendees to switch out of their typical solution mode and say, oh no, you can't do that because there's too much politics happening in this particular area, or there's the lack of resources in this other area. And they had to really kind of shift gears. And my job was to make sure that they were uncomfortable during that week, and that they challenged their own thinking, because getting a group of experts in a room together to solve a complex problem is the only way to solve that problem. But only if each of those experts lets go of their preconceived solutions and lets go of the things that are holding them back. And throughout the week, we had people pretty much break down in tears, in a good way, about how much this has changed their view of that problem. When you're experiencing a problem in a city, let's just say it's poverty in a small community, and you're there every day battling it, it gets very real to you, and you can't step back and away from that problem. And if someone starts to talk to you about that problem and offer you solutions and ideas, you immediately reject them. And people would break down and say, I kind of realized that that happened to me, and I wasn't able to step out of it, and I wasn't able to do the problem justice. And, you know, the first 2 days was a journey of realization, and then the last 3 days was a mad scramble to get a solution together to help solve these problems. And these are all people, you know, these people from the ages of 16 to 22 that are making these realizations, which is incredible and makes me, you know, feel very good about how far the UN SDGs are going to go in the future. So that was a really good experience, and I didn't have to design anything during this. I was just there to help them go through the design process, and to, you know, use my skills as someone that's been through the design process millions of times to make sure that they, you know, they understand the principles of the design process, and why we step back from hypothesis, and why we test with people and talk to people. So that was a really awesome one. I'll just click through. Side hustles, this is me again. So when you're in the corporate world, you kind of get to, you have these periods in your corporate life where it might be a bit quiet, or you might not be particularly challenged. You still like your job, but it's kind of a bit quiet in the industry, or you might not have a project on, and you need to find a creative outlet. You need to find a way to, you know, flex your creative side and to flex your design skills on something else. And I kind of really advocate for these kind of side hustles in my team, to anyone I talk to, basically helping, you know, bring your passion to work, but also don't make your passion just your work, make it your side hustle as well. And what I do, this is a kind of personal story, is I have this little company called Cold Drip Co. I'm really passionate about making things. As you can see, I'm surrounded by 3D printers and stuff you can make things with. So I made, myself and a friend created a company called Cold Drip Co. We built a machine which ran on IoT that made cold drip over 24 hours, something that was pretty revolutionary in the cold drip space, because normally you would have to adjust a valve manually over that 24 hours and make sure that it's dripping the right profile throughout the time. We built a profile in code and hit go and let that just happen. And we wanted the company to not be technology or IoT at all. We wanted to hide the technology and hide everything electronic. So you can see all in every other photo except the one at the bottom left, we don't have any technology. It's pretty standard. We've branded everything ourselves. We kind of, had to figure out how to get 3,000 bottles from China, figure out how to do, 1,200 cans at a time. We got into Carriageworks night markets, which was insane. We've been selling at Carriageworks. Probably after about 3 months, we got into Carriageworks farmers markets, which was amazing. And we're very sad to see Carriageworks not in action at the moment. And then, because this is a side hustle, when COVID happened, we just basically turned the company off. We said, right, we can't sell a product to people. We don't want to, put people at risk by creating something that might be able to spread. So we turned the company off and we stopped all of our expenses. And having it as a side hustle allowed us to really control our spending, and it helped us with our creative outlet. It didn't make any money, but it paid for itself and it kept itself in action. And now that it's off, it's not costing any money, and then we can start it up anytime we want. And we have the ability, to spend our kind of extra hours during the week on it and go and talk to people at Carriageworks and really, I guess, keep us, because we're both in corporate jobs, keep us connected to human beings and not just corporate people all day long. So that was really good, designing my own side hustle so I can actually have a creative outlet. It was awesome. And I'm just going to flip through. So the design process, which we've talked about a lot, I'll throw over to Charmian first.
Changing tacks a little bit here. So when we're designing, we use a sort of a variation of the UK Design Council double diamond. And we use this approach to our design work, and it takes us through 2 phases of divergent and convergent thinking. It follows a fairly similar pattern every time, and we have different elements and activities that we can play with depending upon who the customer is and their specific needs. The first diamond is super important. It helps people understand rather than just assume what their problem is, what the problem is they're dealing with. And during that stage, it's a sensing stage, and we build an understanding of the current state that they're operating in. Where are we now? What are the challenges? What's the context we're operating in? We usually then work through a series of activities to identify the problem space that they're operating in, and then to sort of start to focus in on what are we trying to solve for, always keeping the user at the heart of what we do. We'll also look at what's going on externally in the outside world, and that's really important as well. Who are the customers or users? Who's the competition and what are they doing? Where are some great examples of global best practices in that space? What are some inspiring stories that we can bring in? As we move into the second diamond, we really want to encourage people to start thinking beyond business as usual and to start to ideate around the art of the possible, seeking inspiration from outside again, and generating as many ideas as we can around how we might transform a situation. From there, that's when we start co-designing the future. And when we start that process, we want to think lo-fi. We've talked a little bit about prototyping. Starting lo-fi is super important. You don't want people to become too attached to an idea or concept that might get trashed. And that's the tendency for people to become attached to a concept if it's too finished, if it seems too done. So we develop lo-fi concepts, we test, we iterate, we test, we iterate, and we test again. Finally, when we decide what we're going to launch with, what we're going to take to market, that's the next stage. We start to make decisions around what we're going to do next, how we're going to move forward, assigning responsibilities where necessary. And the principles we always want to keep in mind throughout this process are: put the users first, communicate visually, collaborate and co-create, and start your prototyping early and iterate often. Bryan, did you want to jump in and talk any more about this process?
Yeah, I'll jump in and talk about the stuff on the right. So basically, whenever we go into a client with a problem, they always want to start with the hypothesis that they have. And as designers, we step back away from that hypothesis back into, defining what that challenge is. And for every single thing I've done in the corporate world, I've put the same almost every time. It's been pretty much the same as the design process, right? The really good outcomes, you define the challenge, you understand who the customer is, you go and do some customer research, ask them what they feel about that thing. And it's not necessarily asking them about your answer or what you think the solution is. It's asking them about that particular thing. So if you're working for, say you're working for SBS, you don't say, hey, what do you think of this app? You go out and say, when do you watch TV? And how do you find the programs that you want to watch? And, when you're on the bus, what are you doing? Do you pull out your phone? Talk me through what that looks like. What do you think of media in general? And you just get a broad understanding of everything to do with media or content consumption for that person. And if you do that enough times, you start to get themes across these people and be like, oh, there's something happening here. People are starting to watch 30-second video clips on the bus and they don't want the sound on, so they want subtitles. That's an interesting niche kind of media experience. So definitely doing customer research early on. Then you're kind of ideating together as a team, creating lo-fi concepts, testing those concepts either with other team members or with customers, then creating lo-fi prototypes, doing customer testing with those prototypes, iterating and testing again. Launching at some point, that's going to be a big problem that people run into, is how much prototyping, how much iteration do you do before you actually release it to market. Then once you've launched, getting feedback on the thing and then iterating it while it's in market, if you have the ability to do that. On the prototype point, we prototype many things in Deloitte Digital. The easiest things are the kind of apps, websites, visual things like playbooks or brochures or marketing collateral brands. They're very easy to prototype, right? We all know how to do that. But then once you start getting into really weird kind of concepts or intangible things, it starts to get a bit harder and it starts to force you to use your brain a bit more. Say, for example, I am prototyping a mortgage process. Parts of that process are phone calls or conversations. And as I mentioned before, you can kind of break that down into a conversation. So you might have someone pick up a phone and talk to someone on the other end. That's a prototype. You might have someone walk into a bank branch and you think, I don't want to create a full-scale bank branch. So what we'd do is we'll get out the Lego and we would build a bank branch and we'd say to someone, you are this Lego person. Please walk into the bank branch and tell me where you would stand and what you would do and talk me through that. So we would get, we would be able to move things around in the branch based on where they went. If they would say, I'm walking into the branch and I'm looking for a teller. Okay, cool. So we should put the teller somewhere where they first see them. So, that's part of the process. Another part of the process might be online. It might be an app, it might be a website, it might be a text message that someone gets, it might be an email. The thing that you need to keep in mind when you're prototyping processes is that it's made up of multiple different experiences, and the process in itself from end to end needs to convey some sort of, it needs to have its own kind of ethos. I don't know how to put this in words, but it needs to be like this end-to-end thing that when all of these things line up together, it really works as an experience for the customer. If you go through this process and all of a sudden when you're on the phone to someone and it's a terrible experience, that breaks your process prototype. And that that's a really terrible part of your prototype. When you start to get into the really tricky things like prototyping a business model, that's where you need to get something like business origami out. So Hitachi actually developed this thing called business origami, where it has like little pictures of computers and little pictures of like desks and office buildings, and you lay it out on a table, and you say, okay, this business unit is over here with this computer, and they talk to this person, and you get a piece of string and you connect them together, and you can map out organizational charts, you can map out all sorts of crazy things with business origami, and it gives you the tangible ability to like pick something up and move it around and say, well, that's a really big team, I have to actually pick them all up and move them over here. So it's a really great way to prototype intangible stuff. And then I've even prototyped financial models where someone said to me, I've got this financial model, it's really hard to explain to people. I want to prototype it, but I don't really know how because there's so many nuances to it. And I just grabbed a whiteboard marker off a whiteboard and said, draw this financial model on the whiteboard for me. Where would you start? And they said, well, I'll probably start with like this number because this number drives everything. And then this is connected to this. And then this is connected to this. Oh, that was actually quite easy. Thanks. So sometimes it's as easy as just drawing something on a whiteboard, and you prototype that way. And at the core of that is explaining it to someone and storytelling to someone in a really short amount of time, and using your storytelling abilities to convey that idea really fast. Conscious of time, and that was our last slide. So maybe we should jump into some Q&As.
I saw there's a couple of questions on the chat. There's one that I'm dying to answer, Bryan.
You go.
So one of the questions, oh, hang on, where's it gone? Oh, they've been published, right? Is what opportunities do you think the maturing Internet of Things will bring to the design field? So about 18 months ago, I think, Bryan and a couple of other people here in our team, we started looking at how digital twin technology could be used to design better experiences for people in the commercial building space. So for those of you who don't know, digital twin technology is essentially it's creating a virtual replica of a physical entity using IoT devices, sensors, etc. So we started to think about how we could do that and how we could take our clients through a journey to identify how they could use that technology to improve experiences. So we actually worked with a girl on our team who's a futurist, and we designed a game. And basically the game it took clients through a series of design steps where they designed what their commercial building looked like using different physical elements, paper and cardboard. And then we used a series of future provocations to challenge the way things were operating. So it might have been, all of a sudden you're coming to work and the elevators aren't working. If we were doing it now, there'd be a COVID one for sure. And then basically the client has to look at how IoT technology / digital twin technology could be used to improve that experience or to deal with that future scenario. And beyond that, we started talking to clients about how else that could be used to improve experiences. And we discovered there was a lot of interest from hospitals and hospital groups on how that technology could be used to design better experiences, for example, in emergency departments, or to determine the number of beds that they might need in a ward or a facility at any one time, and how they can adapt quickly to different scenarios. We also discovered a lot of interest at the time from airports on how that technology could be used to design better experiences there when you're checking in your baggage, when you arrive at the airport. So we are starting to see a lot of scenarios where that can be used and where design can play a really important role.
That's a great answer, Sham. Thank you so much. I might, there's another question there. I don't know whether either of you want to have a tackle at that. And possibly you have answered that talking about prototyping, but Bryan, did you want to have a look at that, or Sham?
Yeah, I can talk to that one. So it's about talking about lo-fi materials for making models and how important, you know, being able to pick up something and make something is. How do you prototype, iterate and test designs when you're not actually developing a physical outcome? So kind of on that bank branch example, so there's all those different elements of it. You know, some of it is a conversation that you have with someone. Some of it's, you know, you need to pick up the Lego and build the bank branch. Some of it is, you know, sometimes what we'd do is, if it's a process where you have a piece of data moving through a system, we would have a physical representation of that data, or we would anthropomorphize that data. So we would give it a name, give it a kind of character, give it character elements, make it a person, and then either that person, as the data anthropomorphized, would walk through the process itself and talk to us about that process, or we would have an object that is physically passed through the process if it's data, and we would say, right now we are prototyping, I'm going to try and think of something off the top of my head, which is going to be like impossible, a piece of data going from a website into a database and then cropping back up again in a retail store and helping someone after they've bought something online and then going into a retail store. And we would have to say, you know, how does that piece of data actually get through into the retail store and start talking to someone and say, you know, piece of data, you know that someone's about to walk into a retail store. How do you tell the salesperson at the desk that you are there and that you are ready to give them information to help this person in the store? And as human beings, we can easily put ourselves in the shoes of the data and say, oh, I need to get into this computer and I need to like flash something up in front of this person. I need to get their attention somehow. It's kind of, you know, that's kind of a wacky element of, you know, bringing something to life. But any time when you have something that's intangible, you kind of think, can I anthropomorphize this? Can I turn it into a physical object? Can I talk someone through it? Can I do a role play? Yeah. Hopefully that's kind of getting there for an answer. It kind of depends. Yeah.
That's really helpful actually, Bryan, because at the moment the students are looking at this Sydney Design Week brief, and they have to look at potentially an anthropological perspective. So that's, you know, a really great example for the students to take on board. There's a couple more questions here. I've got one from Maddie. I'm wondering if you could explain more about the collaborative process of your digital team. Also, what role strategy plays when you are design sprinting?
Do you want me to cover that one?
I can do the first part. I can't do the second part.
You do the first part and then I'll think about what the second part is.
So it's kind of a little bit, the collaboration part is kind of what I touched on before. What's really amazing about working with a really big organisation is how many great resources you have. And particularly in digital, we have this, you know, just sensational diversity, and it's intentional. So, you know, we have a sculptor, we have someone who's into music, we have all these people with different passion projects that they bring to the team. So when we know what a project's going to look like, or when we're even sort of bidding for work, we can think about the different specialties we have within the team. We have an anthropologist, you know, we and we can draw on all of them to put our bid response together, and you know, to win then when we win the work, to actually go and conduct the project as well.
Yeah, and on the strategy side of things, so what role strategy plays when you're design sprinting, whenever it kind of ties into the collaboration side of things as well, because whenever we put together a design sprint team, we don't want just all designers or just all business people or just all finance people. We want one person representing every area of the business, and strategy is always represented, and the people doing strategy and have the ability to kind of go and look deep into a data set, deep into quantitative research, and pull out insights that we would never find in qualitative research. So I don't see it as like this design sprint that's all about design and kind of doesn't really cover the strategy side. I see it as this collaborative thing where, you know, I offer design skills and someone else offers strategy skills, and we need to work together and figure out how the whole picture helps us solve the problem and come up with solutions for the client. And, you know, we often will bring in strategic methods and tools that they have at their disposal to help us in that as well. And one of the parts of Deloitte that we have is called Monitor, which was created by a design thinker way back in the day, and brings a lot of elements of design into the way that we do strategy. So it's intrinsic, it's tied together. Yep. Hopefully that answered it.
I think it definitely did. There's another question or comment. Hi, Bryan and Charmaine, the Deloitte Digital team sounds like a lot of fun. Is there a summer vacation or program especially for Deloitte Digital? If so, what is the recruitment process like? And do you have any portfolio assessment centre interview tips? And I think that's actually, we might finish on that question, but a very relevant one for our students who in the very near future will be heading out of the university and looking to join teams like yours potentially one day. So I'll throw to you guys again.
Yeah, cool. I can answer that one. So we do have a Deloitte-wide recruitment process for summer vacationers and graduates. We have a summer vacation program. We have two lots of 4 weeks, I believe. So it's in either December, late November, early December, or late January, early February for 4 weeks. The process is all on the Deloitte website, particularly for Deloitte Digital. I think there's kind of a drop-down box where it says which part of Deloitte do you want: tax, audit, accounting, risk, finance, and then consulting and Deloitte Digital. So there's definitely the Deloitte Digital side of things there. Some tips, I think, is kind of just understand, if you're going into consulting, understand it's very much about helping clients solve problems, and the thing that you bring is the design process and the design side of things, the methods and tools that help us solve really big problems in really collaborative ways. And it's all about kind of expressing how good you are at collaborating, how good you are at making prototypes, coming up with ideas, being creative, being collaborative, all of those kind of good things. Even getting into the data and saying, I can do really good qualitative research, I can understand customers, because on the other side, you'll have a strategy grad or a strategy vacationer saying, I'm really good at spreadsheets and I can get into the data, but they don't have that kind of customer picture. They can't go and talk to people as good as, you know, designers can and infer insights from just those conversations. So I think those are the tips, and then definitely having a good portfolio as well. And then once you're in Deloitte Digital, making sure you go and talk to everybody. Like, don't just go in there and stick with your small team. Just go and ask the directors and the partners and the managers to have a coffee and talk about what they do, and be really curious about what kind of projects they do, what kind of industries they work in. And if you want to work on really small projects that have, like, you know, a big impact, you're not going to get that many of them at Deloitte Digital. It's like, we work with some of the biggest organizations in Australia on the big problems that they have. And sometimes it's a bit frustrating how slow they move. So making sure that when you come in, you say, you know, you understand what the projects are like and how big they are and what kind of impacts we're making on Australia, and whether that's the right thing for you. Because some people, they do like those kind of small projects off to the side. I know, you know, I myself long for those kind of small problems, and that's why I created Cold Drip. So yeah, I think just being really curious about what we do and who our clients are and how we solve the problems, and what the process is for progression and promotion and things like that. It's good to have all these questions and get answers.
And don't forget to point out what your unicorn skill is.
Your unicorn skills, exactly.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Listen, thank you both. We're just run out of time now, and some of our students are going to head over to their tutorials. So, Bryan and Sham, I can't thank you both enough for that presentation today. I am absolutely confident you have struck a chord with so many of our students, particularly in the middle of this this brief that they're working towards, that the assessment that they're doing, and overall as designers. Also increasing our vocab, teaching us about dreamatoriums, about business origami, design sprints, digital twin technology. It really does sound like an incredibly exciting design studio, design practice that you run, and we're incredibly grateful that you were able to spend the time today talking to our students. So thank you all so much. We'll end the live event here now, and once again, just on behalf of all the Design Studio 3 students, thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
You.